Welcome back to Weekly Huddle Podcast, where the draft never stops, and neither do we. I'm your host, Owen, and today I'm here with the originator of that intro and the guy you've been seeing on this channel all summer long with his summer scouting reports, Newt Weston, over from at NFL Draft Weston on Twitter, writing for Zero Tech Draft. How you doing, buddy? It's been a while.
It has been a while. It's actually like hearing you say that's kind of funny because I'm usually like pumping myself up. I know you've seen like the outros and whatnot of me like trying to just get it out and get going. So it's kind of funny to hear, you say, and I know I've checked in for like you doing some stuff with Bill and everything, but it's good to kind of be back on with you for sure. It is funny like releasing stuff all throughout the summer on your channel and never actually having a conversation on camera with you.
Yes, I've been debating because I still have all the recordings saved. I might just do a supercut of the mess ups, and I don't know if I'll post it, but I will just have it to have, and it'll be the best thing ever. But that
could be some YouTube shorts right there.
It could be, and in fashion, Mowgli had to come say hi as soon as I started talking to the microphone. Not when we were talking in the pre-show, no, only when the recording starts. But for anybody who doesn't know, Newt and I work on the Draft Professor together. We recorded or did podcasts last year covering D tackles and offensive linemen every week last year for the whole entire college football and draft cycle. This upcoming season, eventually, I think there's some different things in the works, but we will be working together again, working on D tackles and edges for the Draft Professor on Wednesday nights. Come this upcoming fall draft cycle, sometime during then. But for now, Newt, you posted, like you said, a bunch of videos where you were covering the top 10 of each position, posting them to the Zero Tech Draft website. I have the merch on here. I got the window of opportunity. Apparently, the sweatshirt is so comfy. My wife says I'm not allowed to wear it anymore. It's hers now. So now I'm gonna have to buy another one, which you can go buy over at the NFL Zero Tech Draft website for their merch. And you've been doing your top 10 lists and then also posting them on Weekly YouTube channel, which they got some good traction. I really enjoyed it, especially some of the shorts contents we were able to pull out of that. So I thought a good idea would be to come in and compare and do a little bit of the battle of the boards. You guys have seen Newt's top 10s. I've done some of the players. I haven't been able to do all of them between working with the stuff I've been doing for Jim's podcast over at the Draft Professor and some of the other stuff I have going on, including making content here. In addition to that, I haven't gotten all the players Newt's done, but we have gotten a significant amount. So today, we're going to be talking about the offensive 2026 NFL draft prospects we covered this summer. I'm excited. I think we did one of these before the last draft cycle, and I only just recently, I know I had access to this the whole time, but I wanted to kind of cut myself off from it. The full entire list, I only just recently went and found your rankings over on Zero Tech Draft. So I'm getting kind of fresh eyes in this, and I have plenty of questions. We're going to start with quarterbacks here. Obviously, we're going to start with our wide receiver, our offensive positions. I just said quarterback. We're going to start with our offensive positions, including quarterback, and just ask each other questions on what we have for different players. So, does anything stand out to you immediately, Newt?
I'm honestly going through and like looking at your list and where guys are. I think it's fairly close to a lot of the opinions I have. I know that there's one that stands out, Lenore Sellers for sure. I know I have him a lot higher. I don't even know. Do you have him on your list?
Yes. So he is a third round film grade, which means with my position modifier, which I did kind of crimp from you, he's a back half of the first round grade for me right now.
Okay, I must have just missed him then. So like, and Sellers is going to be a kind of player, especially given if you guys got a chance to watch the, week one for him. I think it's going to be a lot of those conversations that people are having, over and over about Sellers is the talent is there, the athleticism is there, but how he performs and how he plays under pressure, I think is like the biggest thing. What did you think about Lenore Sellers?
The fact I saw a tweet during that South Carolina, who were they playing? Virginia Tech game.
Yep.
That it was like South Carolina has 4 creative Madden characters on their offense, like that archetype of player, and Sellers is one of those guys. 6'3", 240, which is heavy for a quarterback. But he runs like he's one of the best athletes at the position I've seen in a while. Like going back to like Lamar Jackson at Louisville days, where he was able to run away from defenders. And the whole problem with Lamar was, he was so skinny. I mean, obviously he is going to be a bit faster, but he's 240 and running away from small DBs. And he has that rocket arm where he's able to just throw it down the field 70 yards from his knees, type of stuff, which pairs well with a track star wide receiver in Nick Harbor. So, like, I think what he's doing right now in the South Carolina offense, they're maximizing it to be a good college quarterback for what they want him to do. For me, looking at him as an NFL prospect, I do think he is still rough around the edges enough that I'm a little cautious about taking him. That's why I have him where I do, which is more back half of the first round, where I think there's a lot more that needs to go into making him a complete product. You're going to have him. Going to throw out a Packers name here for you, Jordan. Like Jordan Love him, where he's getting that time to sit on the bench and learn, and even put him in a situation where he's able to have more of a clean pocket and not have anything complicate his decision-making and processing, because that's already behind the ball right now for what you want for a first-round quarterback. So I do think it's going to be an investment for him. Some of the players I have, so I have him at QB6. The players I have above him, I do all think could play before he can. But at the same time, I do think he has the best traits of any of the quarterbacks we have here when it comes to just raw physical attributes. Yeah,
I mean, I've got him at quarterback 3 right now, and it's a majority of that is on attributes, is on traits. The decision making in the pocket and everything, like you said, he's just got to figure out a way to clean that up. And if you get in a situation where that's advantageous for him, yes, that would be something that I would definitely want to see. But to the point you made, like I've got Cade Klubnik, Drew Aller, and hell, I'd even put Sam Levitt above Lenora Sellers right now in terms of would I take them to play a game for me tomorrow and be able to function kind of within there. I think Levitt's kind of that line because I got Aiden Childs after him too. And I think all those guys are younger players that have a lot of athletic upside. It's just like how much can they put it together. But I think Klubnik and Aller for sure, they're more polished within there. I just think that some of the things that they have as far as the ceiling for them is going to be capped a little bit as compared to Sellers, where whatever version of Sellers we get, like you mentioned with Lamar, that's going to be something that if he can tap into that and he can be that really true dual threat quarterback, you love to see it. But Anthony Richardson is sitting fresh in everyone's head in terms of that pure raw athletic talent. However, the play under duress and the decision making just isn't there. So that was probably one of the biggest things I saw as a difference, especially at the top. I don't know. What did you think about the quarterbacks? Anything from mine that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the one I'm going to stand out, and I'm going to invoke 2 names when talking about this, but it's really a conversation about one guy. I think we can make it a conversation about both. It's Sam Levitt, which you brought up there when tossing it. And I would agree that I think I would take him to start a football game in the NFL for me tomorrow over Lenore Sellers, and including this guy that I'm going to talk about with him and kind of do a comparison with in Aiden Childs. I would take him to start over either of those guys tomorrow. I have Aiden Childs, however, as my QB3, and Levitt I have all the way down at QB10 for me. We're not in the start, like I said, Sellers with QB6. I watched Levitt, and I did like his play style. And you have him higher up than I do, obviously. Yeah. The reason I bring him up, he is quarterback 6 for you, whereas Childs is quarterback 7. So they're a lot closer than I have them graded. And I can definitely see why that is the case. Levitt has better processing, is an accurate thrower of the football, makes some better decisions. I do think for me, he's a bit backyard football-y for my taste. Like he does do a lot of stuff good. I really like, and he's not like, I don't know if you haven't watched him yet, but John Mateer is like the epitome of like backyard football, and I'm totally out on him. I think I haven't. Again, Washington State John Mateer. We'll see what happens with Oklahoma, but Sam Levitt had like tendencies with that, and I really question some of his physical traits to be able to play. He really straddles that line for me when it comes to can he have an NFL arm?
Yeah,
he's been a smaller side. He can move, but like how well can he move in comparison to like NFL versus college speed? So for me, it's more so can he clear those physical thresholds? Whereas Aiden Childs doesn't have any of those questions for me, and for him, it's more so can he start putting together mentally, which I also think is a bit of an overstatement because we did the Michigan State podcast, and I was kind of the lone outlier here when we did this on the Draft Professor, where I thought the fact that, yes, he is still slow to get through his processes and his reads, and he makes some poor decisions, which causes him to turn the ball over a bit more than you'd like. I do think, though, the fact that he was a redshirt freshman quarterback in a pro-heavy offense at Michigan State, he was asked to be under center, sell hard play action with his back to the defense, turn around, and then get the ball where it needs to be. Now, it took him a bit long to get the ball there, but I did feel like when I was looking for, like, okay, is the ball going to the right spots? And I felt like it consistently was. And with him just needing to quicken the pace up, especially if you're going to ask him to be in that more play action heavy pro style, turn your back to the defense offense, or to where he's not going to be standing in shotgun and having the full field read in front of him pre and post snap as the ball's coming to him. He's going to be needing to process even faster. So he threw a lot on his plate. I'm curious to see how he looked against Western Michigan because that's not really a super high level opponent, but I do want to see if he's made some strides there. But for me, has all the talent in the world. I think he's already handling a lot on his plate really well for such a young player. And I have more confidence that he can put together with the mental side of it than I have the confidence that Sam Levitt's going to find the magical bag of beans that makes him throw it 20 extra yards with more velocity or have a bit of a faster 40 time.
Yeah, and I mean that's all fair comparisons within there. So I do have them, and this is worth pointing out to anyone that doesn't have or isn't looking at mine. They're number 6 and 7 for me, but there's a massive drop once you go between those two on my overall big board. Like Sam Levitt's quarterback 6, he's number 26 on my big board. Aiden Childs is quarterback 7, he's number 71 on my big board. So there's a really big gap between the two. With Childs, I might be a little harsh on him, and I definitely hear the things that you're talking about with where he's at. The thing that I like about him is he's playing at Michigan State, which is that pro style system. And I think that ultimately for his development, you have a quarterback that fits that physical mold. He does give you some juice as a runner, and he's got all those things there. I think it goes back to, and he's a younger player, and I'm glad that you brought that up, but it goes back to like the Carson Beck conversation that people are having to this year. You say, like, this is a guy that he's got all those tools, he's got everything there. With Carson Beck, it's the decision making and how much is that going to improve. I think with Childs, that's where I see him. I like a lot of those things that he brings. I respect the fact that he's young, and I think that he has a lot to offer and to continue to grow on. But he just continuously has to be able to do that. Mowgli doesn't agree with me. He wants to get his 2 cents in.
He's a big Aiden Childs fan.
With Levitt, I see, and I think it might just be more, that trend currently. I see more him trending up and him being able to build upon a lot of progress that he made, early at Arizona State and continuing to grow throughout, where Aiden Childs, you see flashes here and there, but it's a very static season where he didn't make necessarily any of those big leaps and jumps throughout the season. Now that's where if he can come back this year and he can really elevate himself in what is a really good system for him to be playing in as like his draft stock is concerned, I think that's something that is going to be able to rocket him up my board. But just the way that I see them now, I see Levitt taking advantage of those opportunities and Childs just kind of like existing within there. And that's kind of like the differences that I have. I do find this interesting also. We're talking about these two, and I don't know if you know the answer to this question because Sam Levitt started at Michigan State, and then he left, and Aiden Childs came in. Do you know, did Aiden Childs like force Sam Levitt out, or did Sam Levitt leave, and then they went to get Aiden Childs as a replacement?
I can find that out real quick for you.
Yeah, because I know that Levitt started his career at Michigan State. That was his redshirt freshman year. Then last year he transferred to Arizona State. Obviously got the starting job there. As you said, Aiden Childs started at Oregon State, and then last year he transferred to Michigan State. So I was kind of wondering, and I don't know why I never looked at this, but I just noticed that as I was checking out my notes, like what was the overlap and who forced whose hand?
Yeah, so Aiden Childs, like you were saying, started at Oregon State, and then his first season as a player at Michigan State was 2024. So he was played some games for Oregon State in 2023, first season as a starter was last year for Michigan State in 2024. Sam Leavitt last year obviously played for Arizona State after transferring out of Michigan State, which his first year as a starter for Arizona State was 2024. So in 2023, he was at Michigan State. I don't know what the timeline is for who got there when. My assumption would be Leavitt hit the portal and then Michigan State looked to replace him with Childs, because Leavitt didn't really play a ton at Michigan State. He only had 45 snaps in that 2023 season, whereas Childs had 100 snaps at Oregon State that 2023 season. So it looked like Childs played a bit more Oregon State, wanted to move on. It could also be the other way around, where they brought in Childs and Leavitt hit the portal because they knew that they were moving forward in a different direction. So I'm not entirely sure. That probably should be a good thing to look into, though. So it is interesting.
I'm curious now that we're. I mean, it just happened to be those two players right next to each other.
Yeah, it's funny. So one last thing before we move off of quarterbacks, and we were kind of talking about it with Childs, which he'll probably be my answer for this, either him or Sellers, more so than even Manning. But which of these quarterbacks do you think the underraters should or would benefit the most from going back for another season? If you had to pick one of them. Because so while you think, I'll explain my process. I think I'm going to go with Childs just because he has that physical talent, not to the level Sellers does, but he has enough, and his ability to pick up that pro style offense is going to be really good. And the more he spends time in it, and if he can continue to improve his turnover tendencies, then he'll be better off to wait and then be maybe a potential number one overall quarterback. Whereas Sellers, I think he could hit the draft now, and his traits himself, we're going to give him the first round regardless. I don't know if he ever has the upside to be a number one quarterback. I don't know if him staying in South Carolina can improve his processing to a way where you're going to be like, okay, I'm comfortable him going there. So without him transferring out and going somewhere else that's going to teach him up there, I think his best chance is to maybe hit the league. And I mean, me and you both have Arch Manning as number QB1. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about him going back to school. I think if he came out this year, he'd be fine, and he'd be QB1, drafted number one overall, regardless of how he even performs this season. I think he's put enough on tape already that you're like, okay, I can work with that. But I do think that there is a benefit for him to go back as well. But I do think of all of those guys, the one who could improve their draft stock the most would be Childs, becoming maybe a potential number one overall quarterback type player.
I'm definitely not going to fight you on that, because I think that you make a lot of sense with you kind of saying like continue to see himself in that pro style offense and those things. The one thing I will note is I wonder, and I mentioned him already, I wonder how fresh the memory and failure of Anthony Richardson is in GM's heads, where they're like, I don't want to take a guy that is just like this ball of raw talent unless he can actually prove that he has that ability to, be a true passer. So I think if Lenore Sellers comes out and he still struggles with playing under pressure, he still has some question marks around his ability to, be an efficient passer, I think that ultimately that might deter him in the eyes of NFL scouts, just because they're not maybe willing to take that flyer on a first round pick because they saw, what happened, 3 years ago now, when we take a look at Anthony Richardson. So that's like the one thing I might say, to make a counter argument for that. But I agree with what you're saying with Childs for sure.
Yeah, and I'm just checking it right now because another thing with Richardson when he came out of Florida was he had, and I'm just double checking the numbers on it right now. I think it's like 2, 3 plus. He had 15 starts under his belt when he came out. And Sellers right now, with last night's game being number 13 for him, if he played every game this season, he'd be up to like 20, a little bit over the 20s. That may be a situation where if I'm him, I'm thinking, okay, they may be scared off by 13 starts, but I can get like a solid 20 to 25 starts in my college career. I think you could then commit as Sellers like this season if he gets up to that over that 20 mark, because the scaring off of that with Richardson may be that like, okay, we just didn't have enough overall game tape on him to make the commitment, but now we do with Sellers. And if you were Sellers and you went back and you didn't improve with processing, you tank your stock even more. So while I do agree that there's probably a fear factor with the Anthony Richardson pick and how that kind of is still sticking in people's minds, I think there also are examples of maybe even a Cardale Jones where he didn't come out right away. And he went from first round pick to fourth round pick because they saw okay, he continued to not improve on what he showed already to this point.
Right. That's fair. I mean, all of that's fair. It makes sense, especially when you kind of start to put that number behind it in terms of like the actual amount of games played and those pieces. And I mean, it's ultimately, I think, comes down to like how much you're going to bet on yourself in that situation and the elements that follow there. So no, I agree with that.
Yeah, but the position that usually doesn't have that many questions and marks, and we're usually pounding the table for people to come out early, is running back. So let's hop over to that. And has anything on this list right here stuck out to you when it comes to the running back rankings I have in comparison to what maybe you have right now?
Yes, and it's not the argument of who we have for our running back one. So Jeremiah Love, both of us have. It is the question mark around the fact that you have a blue chip grade on him, and I have him as my number 30 overall player. When I take a look at him, I see a undisputed number one running back in this class. I just don't see that level of talent that I saw from an Ashton Genty or even an Omarion Hampton, in my opinion. I think he is a really good running back, but I think if I were to stick him in last year's class, he'd be running back 3 or 4. So you obviously really like him. You've got that top 10 grade on him. What really elevated him for you to, rocket him all the way up to number 2 on your board?
Yes. So he is my second overall player, which I did think that was a bit rich. I wasn't sure what the temperature was on him with, say, like in the community as it is, with how high up on people's big boards he was. I know that he was kind of a consistent RB1 type player in this class specifically, but I didn't know what the consensus was when it comes to how good of our running back he is. I have him only half a point lower than I gave Ashton Genty last year. For me, so Genty, they win in very different ways. I think Genty his eliteness came from his ability to shed tackles and be able to be compact and play with strength and not go down on first contact. With the question marks in his game, the reason why he didn't, I had people were telling me that he was the highest grade running back they've had ever, higher than Bijan Robinson, higher than some of the other players, Saquon Barkley, that I've at least graded in my time being in the draft sphere. And I couldn't be there because there was just that top end athleticism question mark, whether it was the breakaway speed, ability to make guys miss consistently, or just get the edge a lot, especially against the higher up competition where you're playing against faster athletes. I never thought he wasn't a blue chip player. Let me get that clear with Ashton Genty. That I thought he deserved to go where he went. I had him top 5 player on my board. For Jeremiah Love, I see a back 6 foot 212. I am on record saying I like my backs a little bit more compact. Maybe if I was a 5'10", 212, I would have been over the moon. But for me, I didn't have those question marks when it came to his ability to break one plays long. I think he had like a 99-yard touchdown against Florida State. A different team last year where he had like a 99-plus yard touchdown. He had a bunch of like 70-plus yard touchdown runs. He had a ton of explosive plays where he's beating out run angles. He's not having to weave through and have guys catch up to him. He's able to run away from defenders. So he has the size. He has the IQ, the vision, the footwork that I look for in running backs. I coach running backs now at I help with the varsity guys and the running backs in my coaching job, and I screen recorded some of the Jeremiah Love clips I had going on for me. And I was showing them like, this is exactly what we're trying to teach you here. This is the way we want you to place your feet when the A gap collapses like this. This is how we want you to cut back and find this. He was just a player that did everything right when it came to textbook. What are you looking for when they're running inside zone, outside zone? And he also plays with an edge, like a nasty. Like he has the size and he uses it well. Like he as either a run blocker on QB power, like he was flat backing dudes in that USC game, or as a player that's taking the ball and pushing the pile. I think he can do that as well. The only real question mark I have in his game, and it was a similar question mark I had with Genty's as well, was receiving ability. And even like last night in that Notre Dame game against Miami, they utilized, I think it was the drive that Notre Dame did to tie the game. They were brought it up like, hey, how is Jeremiah Love going to be removed from this game because now it's a 10 or it was a 10 point. They went down 10. And the question from the commentators was, is Jeremiah Love going to now be removed from the game since he's not really a receiving back? Notre Dame quickly answered that by throwing him a short little pass out of the backfield as a check down and then having a designed throw to him the next play. And then he was out wide as a wide receiver immediately after that. Like, I think he has that athleticism to be a receiver or a receiving weapon and be an all 3 down back. And it just can come down to usage in Notre Dame's offense. So I do think he even has upside to be better than Genty. But for right now, I would have Genty higher than him. But he would be my RB2 in last year's class.
Okay. I like him a lot better as a receiver than and I know you say you kind of like have that upside. I don't like the fact that the commentators are saying that. I don't think they just have that experience with the fact that he's a really good receiving back. Maybe not like we're not talking to Bijan Robinson, but he's going to be a weapon that Notre Dame can use throughout. There's a handful of times last year where you can see him motioning into the slot and getting really good opportunities. If you take a look at the yards per route run for him last year, he's 1.37, which is a running back. That's phenomenal when you're talking about him there. He had 32 receptions last year. So I really, really like this guy in terms of all facets of the game. I know that the Notre Dame quarterback, who I'm blanking on right now, but regardless, he's not Riley Leonard. But I know that even last year when they asked Jeremiah Love to be a lead blocker for Riley Leonard, like he's a guy that's willing to do all of those things. And I think he does bring you a really well-rounded aspect of the game. And kind of the reason that I have him as my number 30 player, and he's got a top or a second round grade, like a really high second round grade for me. But I just don't have that first round grade on him is I think he does a lot of things really good. I just don't think he necessarily stands out as like being phenomenal, like especially as a runner like Genty was. I think Genty's contact balance, the ability that he had to slip tackles and all of those elements were just really, really special to me. I like the length. I like the things that Jeremiah Love brings. And I do get a lot of the things that you're saying with that, especially like when you're talking about the footwork and his ability to move from the A gap to the B gap. When the collapses, I think he's a really good player within there, which is why you're not going to catch any argument or flack from me when we talk about him being, RB1 and even like a potential first round type talent. I just don't see him as that elite runner like Genty was, but definitely a player that I like a lot. And obviously you're really high on as well.
Yeah. So now looking at your list and trying to kind of talk, I have a couple of different points because we're a bit off on some of these players. And I'll just toss out here. I'll give you my list of talking points. Let's see which one interests you the most. So now. This is coming off the heels of him smoking my former employer, but I have Darius Taylor a bit lower than you do. Okay. Same with Mekhi Hughes. So those are some players that, and CJ Baxter in general, I'm also kind of lower on, just but he's more so injury stuff. So I'd say Mekhi Hughes.
I think CJ Baxter, we don't necessarily need to talk about a ton. Like the injury is the biggest thing with him. Yeah. I'm watching 2023 film and kind of like erasing the injury from existence as I'm grading him. But yeah, if something were to continue to persist, that would be a lot bigger of a talking point, but go on.
Yeah. So I'm a little lower on Darius Taylor and Mekhi Hughes than you are. I have a pretty decent gap between the two Penn State running backs, where I have Nicholas Singleton, with a low second round grade and Katron Allen with a low third round grade, almost a fourth round grade. So that's another talking point, and then also just the Justice Haynes disrespect.
That was the one. The Justice Haynes was the one I was going to bring up. So let's do this. Let me talk Darius Taylor, and then because he's my guy, and we can have you talk Justice Haynes and I know we've already talked a little bit about him because you texted me. You're like, why the hell do you hate Justice Haynes so much? I'll let you kind of take the floor for him, but. So Darius Taylor, the elephant in the room with him is going to be speed. He's not going to be an explosive playmaker. You talked about it with Love, with the 70-yard touchdown run, the 99-yard touchdown runs. That is not going to be Darius Taylor. He does not have the open field home run speed that you probably want from a running back. There have been a couple times where he's just gotten caught from behind. Ultimately, if that's a big deterrent for you, which I know some people, that's got to be something where you have to have that home run ability. I get it. And I see then why he would drop. But aside from that, and there's a little bit of an injury history with him as well. He did have a handful of games that he missed. I want to say 2023, and then he missed the start of 2024 with like an ankle injury. He was able to finish out 2024 just fine. So I think like within there, you're going to see that as well. But everything else with him, I really, really liked. I think that he's patient. He understands blocking schemes. He's able to burst through the hole as needed, and he's really explosive between the tackles. He's such a punishing runner. Like, he will lower his shoulder, he will run over a guy, and he looks to deliver violence at the point of attack, as a ball carrier, not even as a defender. And you see that mentality, and you see how guys, approach him. He's not elusive, he's not shifty, but he still had a missed tackles force rate of almost 0.25 last year. I think it was 0.23, where he's getting that just from running dudes over and being more physical than them at the point of contact. And then additionally, he's another back that is a plus receiver. Like, he had, I mentioned last with Jeremiah Love, 1.37 yards per route and 32 targets. Darius Taylor dwarfs that because he had 62 targets last year and he had 1.42 yards per route run. So a guy that, once again, he can play all aspects of the game. He doesn't have that like burst and high end athleticism that you're going to get for Jeremiah Love. That does kind of fall him, even though it's, the difference between 1 and 3. Him and even CJ Baxter are going to be about 20 spots lower than Jeremiah Love on my board. But what did you think? What did you think about Darius Taylor? I know you said you got him a lot lower. What were the big sticking points with you?
So I have him like as a middle of the third round. So I think if I can check my position multiplier, because I do have running backs. They're the one of the only positions that actually takes a dip with the position multiplier.
You're like, I hate running backs so much, I'm gonna actually take away any credit I give to them, and we're gonna strip their grade away.
The way I think I came out with your multiplier is like, okay, if I put this in and then I look at him, like, does that feel like where I think the NFL is going to draft? Yeah. And I'm using this as more so predictively, not so much where I would take them. And yeah, So Darius Taylor with his position multiplier drops down to a 4th round grade. He is a 3rd round grade for me, but with the position multiplier knocking down to a 4th round grade. I agree with everything you said. It's exactly perfect. I think I'm maybe not there with the level of burst he has in the inside. I do think he does have some, and obviously you have to have some level of athleticism to be a running back in the Big Ten. And I'm actually really surprised by the amount of natural hands he has and how good of a receiving talent he is, how much of a natural receiver he is. I didn't give him the highest grades I could at receiver just because I think that athleticism also shows up in when you're being a receiver, when you're asked to be out wide or when you're asked to run some of these other like wheel routes and more complicated running back receiving trees that the NFL is going to ask of you, and you want to be a 3-down back. You're going to need some juice to run away from man coverage against linebackers and create that mismatch. So even though I do think he's a very natural receiver, I did punish him a bit twice over when it came to the athleticism because I do think he's just that lower level of a long speed athlete that even though he has a all 3 downs back skill set, the athleticism is going to make you need to add another explosive element in that backfield to complement him. Whereas like a Katron Allen, I think could be that guy, but he's not really a receiver anyway. So he's already typecast. Like he's going to be that early down back. You don't really have to worry about it. But the Darius Taylor effect is like, okay, it's there. You just want to see him add a little bit more juice to really be like a guy who can explode and be kind of more of these upper echelon backs. So I agree with everything you said. I just think I punish him a bit more in the margins than how you
athleticism.
Do.
Yeah. I mean, and it's going to be the conversation around him, and obviously the big question mark or the thing that people are going to scrutinize the most. So, I mean, like we saw the same film, just valued it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think we're pretty on par with that. Now, what we didn't value the same was Justice Haynes, the former Alabama running back now at Michigan. I didn't catch the Michigan game this weekend, unfortunately, so I do have to go and check in how he performed. But I have him currently in my running back rankings with a 2nd round grade, which I guess would be more of a 3rd round grade, and as RB3. Yeah, I do hate running backs. As RB3 for me behind Jonah Coleman and Jeremiah Love, we previously talked about. For me, with Haynes, I feel like that whole Alabama offense last year kind of operated awkwardly, especially with the regime change. Not everyone left and transferred out from the Saban era to the Kalen DeBoer era. And you kind of saw that reflected in how the team performed as a whole. So I do think the change of scenery going to more of a stable, consistent offensive identity team like Michigan is going to help them a lot. what I saw on tape was a player who had a ton of body control, being able to kind of like what we talked about with Ashton Genty, be able to bounce off tackles, keep his body within his frame because his legs aren't going all over the place. He's able to keep it tight and contained and cut and bounce off tacklers and use some power, even though he's not the biggest back in the world. He does have some explosiveness. He has some elusiveness as well, making guys miss in tight. I don't think he's the most powerful, the most elusive back in this class by any means, but I do think he has that in his toolkit. And while he isn't the fastest guy, I do think he has more juice than some of the other players we've talked about previously, even like a Darius Taylor. Like I said, I mentioned Katron Allen's name. He has more juice than some of those guys. And even though it's limited exposure as a receiver, he was used as like out wide in Alabama's offense on slants and on hitches, on some other stuff where he was implemented more, where they trusted him enough to go out there and play that. I do think his athletic profile could lean for him being more of an effective receiver. So there is a lot of projection with this grade. Specifically, I feel like I saw a good foundation for a back where I like I said, more compact guy, shows that up when it comes to shedding tacklers and being more powerful between tackles, but also having some pop in his athleticism and being able to contribute as a receiver. So I think he can, it's all going to be projection if he can be used better in Michigan's offense, but I definitely saw it that he was being held back by the scheme, not so much the scheme was being held back by the talent.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad you brought up the scheme and everything, because it was such a weird year last year. And I have written down he's got limited snaps and experience due to Alabama's offense basically being built around Jalen Monroe. And with that, it makes it challenging for a guy to really settle into his job and his role. And I think the move to Michigan ultimately will be a really, really good one for him. I think that like some of the things that I saw with him, I didn't necessarily fall in love with like his short area quickness and his vision. I think that they're okay. I did agree with the contact balance and the strength, though. I think that this guy, he's a punisher as well, but he brings a little bit more juice than a Darius Taylor does. So I think he does have some of those tools in the toolbox. There's just a lot of things that he needs to continue to grow in. And I think, like you mentioned, it's just him being kind of in an awkward situation with Alabama and how that offense operated last year. I still have some questions on why did he lose the starting job halfway through the season? Not that he didn't get any runs the second half of the season, but it was just it was a very weird year. And if he can bounce back this year and really turn it on at Michigan, I'm definitely willing to say, all right, let's just sweep that 2024 Bama year under the rug, because there were just so many hitches along the way. Let's take a look at what he does, that athletic profile that he brings to Michigan. Is he able to then be, a little bit more consistent? And some of those vision and creativity things just might come from that odd system and that lack of exposure to, meaningful reps that he got. So I definitely see where you're at with him when you talk about it from a projection standpoint. He is a solid athlete. He does have a lot of those things that he brings. I got to see it get put together a little bit more.
Yeah, I also forgot to mention that I agree with your assessment of his vision and some of the more technical stuff, where he was definitely, I felt like he was decently consistent when it was both in man blocking power as well as zone, but he was good for a missed cutback lane every game or so. Like it was definitely something where you're like, hey, he could have hit this hole better, or you could have found this if you were a little bit more patient. So there's definitely stuff that I think he can develop into, and like I said, I think being in a more consistently established offense like Michigan's will help him. To wrap up this positional, I do want a positional talk, unless you have another one you want to jump in on real quick.
Are you going to hit your boy?
Which one?
Jonah Coleman.
So, all right, cool. All right, yeah, I'll touch on him real quick, because I like
Jonah Coleman a lot, and I know you're even higher on him than I am.
Yeah, I had to swoop in. You were like, you texted me as soon as you watched him, like, oh, 2 of my guys are from Washington. And I was like, awesome. And then I watched him, and I'm like, he might not be your boy anymore. He might be my boy. Like he is.
I think he is. I think he's your boy now.
I had to one up you. For my best way to describe it was he's like everything I loved about Cam Scadaboo last year, but without as many athletic question marks.
Yeah.
Where like he's still not the most juiced up guy, and he's 5'9", 228. So like I'm not expecting him to be an absolute burner, but he's that guy that has size, uses it, and is able to have contact balance and elusiveness despite being that. Like he was hurdling dudes at 228 and then he would turtle a dude and then truck another guy right afterwards. Like, he was a nasty, nasty player. For me, it's just going to be the reason I can't put him in like, oh, is he a borderline first round running back type player? Is the receiving third down ability right now is just not there, and that's the athleticism again showing back up there and how I value that. But also, just in general, wasn't that natural receiver. Didn't get used a ton, and the hands weren't as natural as some of these other guys like a Darius Taylor. So he's not going to be that guy that I think maybe could push the boundaries of what a third down or an all three down back could be. But he's a guy hits all my buttons. Plays for Washington for one. Let's get that out of the way. Let's get that bias out of the way. But he's 5'9", 228, super compact, has wiggle despite being a bigger dude, but knows how to use his size well. He's just a guy that I watch and I'm like, okay, I can see. I would want this guy on my football team to be in my backfield because I know he's going to be fun to watch punish some guys. Like similar to how I felt about Cam Skadaboo this year with his role with the New York Giants.
Right. No, I love that. And I really like him. You know, I'm probably a little bit harder on running backs in general right now. I've got him, in more that third round grade. And I think some of that comes from just how I look at them. And, some of these things early on with me developing this new system for grading prospects, I have to get a little bit more of a feeling for as well. But watching him and the way that he plays, I was like, this guy is, he's not going to be the best athlete out on the field, but at his size, what he brings is just so damn impressive. But it does piss me off though about third downs and just like the lack of ability to be a pass protector at that frame, at that size. Not saying he can't do it, but just like where he is now, definitely leaves some question marks. And he had a hell of a game for his week one to smash into the season. So that's that's one of those things where like, hey, you're draft eligible. This is probably, you're a senior. This is your last shot. What are you going to do? And he comes out with a bang like that. It's definitely something where it makes me even that much more excited to check him out and see where he's at.
Nothing was better than getting back. I got out of I went to a Luke Bryan concert that same day. I got out back to my mom's camper, which was around the corner. Like I got out of that parking lot in like 5 minutes in time to be able to sit by the fire and throw on the Washington Colorado State game at starting time. Just chilling by the fire, watching that, having just gone to a 3-hour concert, and it was like, this is awesome. Then watching Jonah Coleman absolutely sun some guys from the Mountain West.
Love it.
The only thing I wanted to say before, or do you have anything else on running backs?
No, I was going to see if you had any more that you wanted to touch on. I didn't know if you want to hit on the duo from Penn State or anything like that.
The most I have on them is just that they complement each other really well. Like they are the players that if you need to draft them into a situation where they have the same type of dynamic they have currently in college, where Katron Allen needs a receiving back with explosiveness to complement him while he's at like he does at Penn State. Whereas Nicholas Singleton needs the inside between the tackles runner who can power it in across the goal line like he has in Katron Allen right now. I'm valuing the athleticism scores a bit more because Nicholas Singleton has that in his favor, whereas Katron Allen has that ceiling factor. So that's why I have them as a bit more of a gap there.
Nice.
And the only thing I wanted to touch on last before that would be just toss out a name for you to watch in your next watch. And this goes for everybody else. I'm always going to big up my guys. And it's not the best timing after the Minnesota game, but I think his offensive line really let him down, is the Buffalo running back, L.J. Henderson.
Here it is, the UB Homer.
He had 1,000 yards last year. Genuinely, when I threw on the tape, I didn't really think much of it. A lot of times with these UB guys, having known them, I like them as guys, I like them as MAC players, but he's a player that I didn't know what I was going to expect when coming at it from the NFL perspective. And there is a role for him in the NFL as like that pure third down receiving back. He has some natural instincts as a runner, and I do like it when it comes to how he's able to attack the line of scrimmage. But with him being from the MAC and having the offensive line he does whenever they go against higher-level competition, he's not really given much of a chance. The best reps you get are him as a receiving back, standing as pass protection, which is kind of universal despite the level of competition. So I think he has a carved-out NFL role right now, which is why I have him as like a day 3 graded pick. But he's somebody that if he was on a better team with a better offensive line, I do think he would be getting talked up a bit more than he is right now. So that's a guy I think you should definitely throw on your watch list whenever you can get around to it.
No, absolutely. I was just looking him up to make sure that I got him on there. especially like looking forward for the film grades that I'm looking at this year. So love the shout out. Of course, it's Buffalo, but still love the shout out.
Yeah, but all right, let's hop over to our wide receivers now. I'm looking at stuff that's going to be sticking out to me. I see you got, we talked yesterday a bit. You wanted to get a few more guys in that I watched because wide receiver was the position I hit really hard. So far, I have 29 guys graded at that position. So I really hit that one, especially helped at when I was doing the team breakdowns over the draft professor. A lot of teams had like 3-4 receivers you had to watch. So I'm glad to see you got some of these guys fit in. I definitely am. I'm probably going to be higher on Jeremy Bernard than most people, so I'm not surprised where you have him. But I do respect that he's in the cluster of receivers he is in with there. The question I have for you, and I guess this is a question for the whole draft space in general.
Player 13 or player 12 is that? Look at you. You'd love Jeremy Bernard.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Here's a question for you because you have him higher than I do. And I've seen wide receiver 1 conversations for him in this class, which I don't count anyone out from being wide receiver 1 in this class with how undecided it is at the top. But Mekhi Lemon, he's a guy that I got to last week. And I've seen, again, wide receiver 1 conversations in a specific thing I'm working towards getting set up for a future Draft Professor episode. I have him as like an early 4th round grade, so with the multiplier, it gets into the 3rd. He's wide receiver 15 for me, behind guys like J. Michael Sturdivant, Elijah Surratt, Malachi Fields, and then obviously the top crop of guys. So where are you on it with him, and kind of what am I not buying into here when it comes to Mekhi Lemon at USC?
I mean, I don't think I'm like overly high on him compared to you. He's a high 3rd round grade for me, but I don't see the high end that other people do. Like I think Hank has him as wide receiver 1. I believe Trevor Sikkema from PFF has him as wide receiver 1. I'm not there with him. And I know I had a conversation with Hank about this, and he talks about the separation and his ability to get open as being next level. I think he's a good separator, but I don't think he's an elite separator. Now, where I do like him is as a slot option because he's 5'11", 190, and you might say, all right, well, he's kind of got that ability, made to play, either given his size. I just think he struggles off the line when it comes to press coverage. But if you can give the guy a free release and you can design something for him to get the ball in his hands, he is electric as a ball carrier. He's a punt returner for USC, and you see it every time he gets the ball in his hands. He had a .25 missed tackles forced last year. When you look at yards after catch per reception, he's 7.3. It's an insane number to look at. And he's a guy that if he has a designated role as a slot receiver in the NFL, and you can just let him feast over the middle and then go from there, I really like him in there. However, I think he's ultimately limited to that. I don't think I'm going to see him in a system as a true X. Maybe, he develops some elements of his game and he's got a little more juice than I'm giving him for, and he can be that flanker type. But none of those things I personally see right now. But I do love him as a slot option. And as like a pure slot type player, he's going to be one of the higher ones I have. I'm a sucker for Aaron Anderson. He's definitely like my number 1, like true pure slot type player. Depending on how you classify Antonio Williams, but I think that Mekhi Lemon does bring that juice in that part of his game. Now, I really definitely want to go back, and not back, I should say, but like as I'm looking at his film this year, I want to look for those separation pieces because I feel like, after hearing it a couple times, and I know you mentioned it, there's got to be something there that sticks out a little bit more than what I'm seeing, or maybe I'm just not seeing it to the extent that others are.
Yeah, so I agree. I think I have him down as like, and I'm not Bill Sparks, so don't take my comp as gospel. But he reminds me, and this is going to be kind of, again, I suck at comps because I oftentimes will go to homer comps from the Bills because those are the players I know the most intimately. But he reminds me a lot of what they have currently in Khalil Shakir, where it's like he's a player who wins with routes, gets separation because he's a technical route runner, works over the middle of the field. When he gets the ball in his hands, he has some dynamic ability to make guys miss and get upfield and has sneaky speed. They don't really see a lot in his routes itself, but when he has the ball in his hands, he's able to just become an athlete. He does turn it on. I also see the struggles when it comes to the press release and being able to be in a more of an outside receiver. And similar to how Shakir was when he was coming out of Boise State, not the best run blocker. He had to develop that eventually, but he has some tenacity, but I don't love him as a run blocker. I think he's best as like a spread option slot type where you can give him some ball work over the middle. He can create early separation and then maybe even get guys to bite on double moves in the seam. But I don't love him as like a transition or transcendent like slot type player just because I don't see a lot of stuff there. Plus, I do think he has some issues, not like overall with his hands, but when I looked at his contested catches, PFF ranks or classifies contested catches not just as the jump balls that we usually typically attribute to that, but also like in crowds and being able to play just when there's contact at the catch point. And he's not able to really fight through and secure those catches even when it's crowded. So it's going to be a thing he's going to have to work with over the middle, especially. And I just didn't really see the vice grip, like strong hands on those plays. So I do think I'm a bit lower than him, and I see him more as like a true typical slot guy. And to kind of throw out my answer to the question you didn't propose but kind of answered yourself, who ranking like this true slot players, not counting Tony Williams, I think him and I can't remember. I always forget these guys mixed up between Jordan Tyson and Casey Concepcion. One of them is also like small on the smaller side.
Tyson's bigger.
So it's Concepcion that is the smaller type. Though both those guys I think can live on the outside, but looking at true slots, my highest graded is Deion Burks, but not by much. Him, Lemon, Aaron Anderson are all clustered in that same kind of region when it comes to like slot players that I think aren't going to be able to play as much on the outside or at all in the NFL.
I'm a little lower on Burks, but I mean Anderson and Lemon, it sounds like fairly close to you on. I was just honestly I was going through it, and for this, and you know, as funny as it is that I happen to be wearing this bad boy today. Side note, did you see he changed his jersey number?
No.
So when they got Parsons and they kind of opened up the door for him to get one, I think there was like a reorg. He changed to number 0. I saw that. I was like, that is absolutely hilarious.
Listen, number 22 is much better because it's such an uglier number for a wide receiver.
I know. It pisses people off and just it evokes that conversation. But I digress a little bit. I don't see actually like that big, pound the table difference. Because even with like Lemon, we're not too far off. I think, in my overall ranking, he's going to be a handful of spots higher. But I have a lot of those guys really closely ranked where it's like, you can just take and shift a couple things around. And, one guy from basically Aaron Anderson at number 7 for me, all the way to, even like Nick Harbor at 14 or at 13 for me. Like I could kind of shake all those guys around. I had Surratt a little bit lower, and I know I had mentioned to you that I just got eyes on him right before this. I think I ding Surratt a little bit more for the athleticism than anything else, but I like him as a player. I think the one guy, though, that is standing out is Concepcion. And I know that Bill's big on Concepcion. I know I see him really high for you. Really, that's like the only standout I have. Do you want to, talk to why and what you see about Concepcion that has you a lot higher on him? I know I love this 2023. 2024 was down for me, and that always kind of raises some flags. But what did you think of him? Yeah, so I'm not Bill Sparks. I don't have him as a wide receiver 1 here. But I do think he plays, and this was a conversation we had. I podcasted a bit with, I'm blanking on his name right now. I was doing top 5 positional rankings with over at the Draft Professor. I can get it real quick. And he was the guy who had he was the one I was pounding the table for you to get Surratt on, because I think he had Surratt as like a top 5 receiver in this class. Okay. I can pull up his name real quick because I feel embarrassed for not remembering it. Taylor. I was podcasting with Taylor. From Chaw Sports Talk, and he had Surratt as like top 5 guy, and he was also not the highest on Concepcion, so that was one in our top 5 wide receiver rankings. He was a guy that we had a conversation on. For me, Concepcion
is not a slot only player, and that's kind of where Taylor was going with it, because I don't love his release. And I don't love his hands, especially when it comes into being physical. I don't love the physicality element of him being on boundary when it comes to getting off the ball, and especially when it comes to like his hands specifically. But when it comes to using some physicality and playing above his weight class, when it comes to creating separation and being a player that works better in space when he can, like he finds ways to get open. And there was a play that sticks out to me. I don't know if it's against Cal or one of these games I watched, where he's in the end zone and confined spaces, and he's the guy, and he does this repeatedly. I think he did in a couple different games where he's running as fast as he can into the body of the corner, putting a punch right in his sternum, and then using that to create separation to come back down the stem. Using a lot of those kind of methods you like to see in these bigger receivers that have that physicality element to them, where you're like, oh, he's big and he knows how to use it to get open. Even though he's not going to be running away from people and using routes to create separation, they're using size to create separation. So not only do I think he's twitchy and able to get separation with those routes, he also has that physical element to his route running specifically that I think sets him apart from some of the other guys who are on the smaller side that maybe not be able to stand out in the boundary. If he can continue to improve his release, which I do think has taken a step up from 2023 to 2024 and hopefully now this year, and clean up his hand technique and being able to bring in and lower those drops, he's definitely a guy that I could see being where I have him currently graded, which I'm banking on a lot of the upside there and cleaning up some of the more deficiencies, which I do think took a step back in 2024.
Yeah, and I'm in full transparency. Like I am a lot harsher on drop rates maybe than I should, and probably more than other guys. But if you got an 11.7% drop rate, that's not where you want to be. And I know that he's not the only one in this class with a really high drop rate, but if you're at double digits, that's a problem. So I think because I see, a lot of the elements that get talked about with him, the separation, I think he's a phenomenal separator and those tendencies. I want to see him continue to grow, as you mentioned. I think he needs to add a little bit of weight to his frame. And I want to kind of go back and take a look at him, really using that size that he has, but I think he could even add a little bit more. Because I did have that as a mark against him, but ultimately it's going to be a fresh experience for him. Where's he at now?
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M. So I want to see him because you saw those flashes. If he can even get back to 90% of what 2023 was, that's a hell of a receiver. So I see all those things that you're talking about there.
Yeah, I like I said, I'm not his biggest defender. When I came into his film, I was like, okay, if I don't like him, Bill's gonna ream me. But I turned out to actually I did like him a bit. Not like I said, he's not my top receiver or anything. He is my wide receiver 6, so he was just outside my top 5. Especially after I got to Jeremy Bernard and had him in the top after not doing him for that top 5 episode at the Draft Professor. But any conversation on our wide receiver 1s being different? I mean, obviously my wide receiver 1 is your wide receiver 2, so there's not much debate there. Cornell Tate is my number 5, so we're kind of similar there. But
I look at all of them there. So like obviously Tate, he's my number 1 wide receiver. But if I look at him, and this is once again like kind of surprising that we're close. Like he's 27 for you, he's 14 for me. I don't think it's like super crazy. I know you're higher on Denzel Boston because you're an absolute homer and you only watch and rate highly Washington and UB guys. But I have Boston at 16. You've got him at 9. I know Tyson you've got up there as well. And like very early on, we were both texting about Antonio Williams and some of the things that he brings. So truth be told, the thing that I'd point out is how freakishly similar the top of our wide receiver group is, because that has not been the case, or that was not the case last year. Yeah,
I think I actually view this year's class a lot similarly to how last year's was, where for me, Denzel Boston he's kind of that guy who, if I had to pick a player to be like your prototypical X receiver who can be like a number 1 guy in an offense, it'd be Boston. Cornell Tate, I think, is a very overqualified number 2, similar like a T. Higgins style player. Maybe not to that level, but if he's your number 2, you're loving that. And that's kind of where I'm at with the rest of these guys. in my rankings, like Jeremy Bernard I think he's a high end number 2 guy. Jordan Tyson, Eric Singleton, all these guys. If they're not your number 1 receiver, you're in love. Denzel Boston is the guy who I'm like, okay, he can be like that true, take that step and be that alpha number 1 receiver of this class. And I kind of view this class similar to last year, removing Travis Hunter because that's just an enigma. But like him being the Ted McMillan of the group, where he is the guy, and then you have a bunch of other players that some teams may love him, some teams might not, and they're the fact that they ceiling out as wide receiver 2s as opposed to being these studs is going to make them fall. Somebody like a Matthew Golden, who I think would be a really good wide receiver 2 as opposed to wide receiver 1. Shout out the Green Bay Packers. Or like even a Luther Burden that I had higher on last year, Ian Manor, guys who I think could be outside or even inside receivers, but not like the dominant volume force of an offense. That's kind of how I view this wide receiver class as a whole.
No, I agree with that. So weird that we seem that similar, but I like the comparisons you made to last year for sure. Yeah.
Well, we've been going for an hour, and I meant to do this a bit earlier. Do you want to toss in? We'll do a quick little ad break. We're hitting the positional groupings that I have not watched a ton of in comparison to you, at least. I have 6 tight ends, 7 tackles, and 10 interior offensive linemen. So we'll have quicker conversations there. But for right now, before we get into this last little blitz round, do you want to give yourself a little ad shout out here on the pod?
No, absolutely. I always appreciate these. I'm very underprepared for it every time, and I just ramble. Newt Weston, you can follow me, find me. Best place is over on the app formerly known as Twitter, at NFL Draft _Weston. I have, for this draft cycle, made all of my grades public facing, and that's pinned as my top tweet on there. Something that I've really enjoyed because it gives me an opportunity to get a lot of feedback on how I run my process. It also lets me kind of be a little bit more, I want to say, like, fair and honest in terms of like, hey, this is out there. I've got to make sure that I 100% buy into this. Not that I don't make tweaks along the way as we're going through things, but I think it just gives me a little bit more of a analytical mindset with these guys. I also run zerotechdraft.com, as Owen mentioned at the top of the show. That's where I post a ton of my rankings, articles. I did all of the little clips for the summer scouting series that I did on the channel on there as well, just to try to make sure that I do have kind of like a home location for all of those. So both of those places you can check me out at. Follow on Twitter, would greatly appreciate. And as you're going through this year's draft cycle, if you want to continue to go back and check out my big board, my mock drafts, and that prospect grades, feel free to do so on zerotechdraft.com.
And I can confirm this is one of the comfiest sweatshirts I've ever worn. So it's phenomenal quality merch.
Yeah, you got a merch link on there. So that's available as well.
Yeah, this is phenomenal. I do love it. And I understand why my wife will not allow me to take it back after this. But all right, let's move over into tight ends here. I have 2 players I have that come to mind. One that we are different on when it comes to grades, and one that you don't even have on your list of here to watch that I need you to throw on. I don't have him graded. He was a guy I watched for our top 5 tight ends episode, where I got like glances at guys and put them and made a top 5, but then give full on grades, which is why my list is shorter. Go ahead.
Is it Gillenberg?
No, he's not even on your long list. I just checked.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, this guy is.
Give me a name. I'm going to add him right now.
So his name is, and you probably, if I say, you'll probably know it. I'm not sure. Michael Trigg. I think he's from Baylor.
I've heard. Yeah, that's what it was. Is it Trigg?
Yes.
All right.
He's this massive dude who, like, if you love run blocking tight ends, you're gonna absolutely love it. He's like a 6th offensive lineman out there. Absolutely massive human being. Definitely needs to step it up in the receiving game a bit. That's going to be areas where you're going to want to see him progress. But as an absolute, like, people mover, road grader, ass kicker, whatever phrase you want to use for it, he just does it the best of anyone. Like Jackson Haas was awesome last year, but he was kind of more that prototypical tight end size, would be more of a moving guy. This dude lining him up, he'll blow the ends off the line of scrimmage. He is awesome. So he's definitely someone I would add to any of your watch lists if you don't already have Michael Trigg down. The tight end from Baylor.
No, he's on there for sure. So I pierce through yours really quick. And I think we have the same top three: Joe Royer, Eli Stowers, Max Clare, maybe in a little bit of a different order. But the thing that stands out to me the most is where you have them versus where I have them, because you have them all as top, 40 players, and I don't have Joe Royer on my list until player 59. So with these guys right here, I think probably the first question I want to ask is, where do you see this tight end class compared to last year if you strip away the first round tight end? So take away Loveland and take away Warren. How do you see these guys comparing to that kind of like second tier of tight end? Because I have them kind of in a similar grade with those guys.
Yeah, I liked that second wave of tight ends. Obviously, I loved the first wave. Tyler Warren, I was giving props to being Brock Bowers level, and I do think I've been drafting him in all my fantasy leagues. I do think he'll have that level of impact, which I think the preseason has definitely shown that a bit as well. So I removing them, I liked. So the second wave, for most people who don't really remember, is Terrence Ferguson, the tight end who went to the Rams. You have, Elijah Arroyo, the tight end from Miami that went to Seattle. There was the Mason Taylor. That's what it was. I knew it was Taylor. I was trying to remember his first name, not say his father's name. Who ended up going to the Jets. So there was a whole wave of these second level tight ends, which I do think, and even in throwing in like Harold Fannin or Rhonda Gadsden into that grouping, I think it really matches to how I feel about this group, where I had all those guys kind of day two grades as well. And the reason is because they had different niches and they were good at different things. They hit different sections of my grading profiles in ways that the other ones didn't, and in high enough regards in each individual skill set that it made them different flavors, but all the same tier of player, where
they were all very unique for sure. Yeah.
So like a Max Clare is your more undersized, like, I'm just double checking, make sure I don't have the wrong name when I'm saying that. For me, he's 6'4", 236 on the lighter end, more undersized, but he's more of a typical like route running type player where he was able to get open for that Purdue offense and be that receiver type tight end where you're not going to really worry about his run blocking nearly as much as an inline blocker, because he adds that level of nuance and ability to get open as a typical receiver out of the slot or off the line of scrimmage, which you've seen even in the Ohio State game against Texas. He was doing some good work there as well already early on in the season. With Joe Royer, he was a guy I felt was a bit more athletically limited, but really smart, hard worker. I didn't love his run blocking. Like, he has the size, and he'll have reps that show up that were like, okay, yeah, he's using his size, 6'4", 255, to his advantage to be able to block and really have that element to his game. But other times he's not really able to diagnose, develop, and attack the run blocks as much as I'd like. So he's a bit more of that safer high floor option where he's a great tight end too, kind of in that role where you want guys that he's not going to be eye popping for anything, but he's a glue guy for your offense. And then Stowers, who is my tight end one, is just an enigma when it comes to athleticism, absolute tenacity as a blocker, even though he's 235. Take about what we said about Max Clare and drop even more weight and be even more leaner without having the absolute, he's not as nuanced as a route runner, can't create as much separation, not as natural a receiver, but he's like the best athlete of the three. And he will put dudes in the dirt. Like, I think it was the Alabama game that he was just run blocking his ass off, or maybe it was the Kentucky game I watched, where he was just absolutely burying dudes because he just runs his feet through contact, does everything well, even though he's not to that size. As a move blocking tight end, he's awesome. So they have different flavors, and I do like them all similarly when it comes to where I would take them, but it's for different reasons individually.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think you hit it really well. I'm a fan of Joe Royer, and I keep going back and forth between Stowers and Royer as my tight end one. I think that both of them have, and like you said it really well, they're not the same player. I like Royer because I think that he is a little more athletic than maybe he gets credit for, but he is just that overall, all around, like really well built tight end. I think the size, I think the play style, and his ability to be both a pass catcher and a blocker stand out. He's not the best pass catcher in this class. Hell, he's not the best blocker in this class, but I think he puts everything together really well in a package. But I think we kind of see them both really, really similarly, especially when using last year's classes, that litmus test. I think that with it, if a guy doesn't stand out, I think the tight end class is going to be a little bit weaker this year, just naturally, especially if you don't have a guy at the top, because I don't necessarily see if they continue to play kind of on par with where they were at. I don't think that I'd necessarily have them drop a ton, but I'm not willing to give a first round pick or even a top 50 pick to Eli Stowers at that little bit more of a pigeonholed type play style that he has. I think the athleticism is really phenomenal, and the path that he got here with as a former quarterback and now transferred to that tight end position makes him obviously very appealing in his athletic ability and understanding the game, especially when you think of quarterbacks that have done that and found success in the NFL. But I need to see a little bit more from one of these guys, or I think Kenyon Sadiq is a really fun player when you start talking about the ceiling that he has. I think if Tanner Koisel can ball out in power 4 football, then he'll be an interesting type player. But I just don't know how much more a lot of these guys are going to be able to bump up and really elevate this class as a whole.
No, I agree. And I definitely think that it's definitely 100% a weaker class. It probably has as good of depth because, like I said, we talked about some of the guys that that went in the second wave last year, and even some of the third wave guys. And then that's when we get to the Randy Gadsons and the Harold Fannons, which don't tell. I forget which one of the draft professors it had Harold Fannin was 10-1. Yeah,
Ryan Sparks loves Harold Fannin Jr.
I
found out his alma mater is also Bowling Green, so I'm gonna start to put a little bit of an asterisk next to that. But he stands by it regardless.
But even so, I think they'll maybe have a better third wave as well, because we talked about guys like, I'm gonna make a joke here because I've listened to the tight end podcast or episode you did multiple times, so I know what you've thought about most of these guys. And I'm gonna say, why do you hate Jack Endry so much? Even though you talk glowingly about him as a walk-on and everything when you're giving his summary. But
I think I like Jack Endry. He's such a shit blocker right now, and he's just so bad at it. I'll tell you, if he can get better as a blocker and just prove to be competent and have an understanding and a functional play strength through there, I think that I could have thrown his name out with Koisel or Sadiq. He's got a really high ceiling because he is a really, really great pass catching option. And he's done so many different things at, where's UCLA? Cal. At Cal, that he showed those pieces, but he's just got to be a better blocker. That's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, for me, I agree, because literally the only time he had solid blocking reps was when he was a fullback or in motion, where he needed to get a full head of momentum to be able to do that and get into guys. And then that's when he was able to take on linebackers and other players smaller stature than him. He's not even Stowers, however his name is pronounced. He's smaller than Endry's, but he has the tenacity and some of that play strength and length. He's still able to bury guys even from a on the line where he's not the most comfortable. Whereas Endry's, I don't think really had that in him to do that. I just felt like I gave him a lot more credit as, the receiving ability and intelligence he was as a tight end, and predicting him to get the kind of that Gunnar Helm role at Texas is going to be bumping him a bit higher for me specifically. So he was a guy that I'm excited to see how he does on his new team. And I think going from Cal to Texas is going to really bump up his stock. So he's one of the guys that I'm hanging my hat on him. Like we talked about Michael Trigg, some of these other players that I haven't gotten yet, but have listened to you talk about them. They sound like they're going to be a better crop than maybe even that tight end 3 or the third wave of tight ends from last year's.
Yeah. I like the depth a lot better. Hey, really quick before we move on, did you get a chance to look at the number 1 H-back in this year's class, in my opinion, Terrence Carter?
He was next up on my list, and I wasn't able to, but I'm excited because you specifically called him the H-back.
He's if he plays tight end in the league, he is going to be the smallest tight end in the league. But like I'm talking like a Kyle Juszczyk type role. I really think that he could excel if he finds the right system. If the 49ers were to be the team to draft him, I would lose my mind because I'd be like, this is like the heir apparent to Juszczyk. I really like Terrence Carter, but you got to look through the lens as an H-back and not as a true inline or even really a slot tight end. Because he's a fun player, but he's definitely pigeonholed a little bit.
Do you think, could you see him, and I'm only asking this because the similar thing was said about him coming out of college, was you see him maybe having like maybe the ceiling of a Chigakonkwo?
I knew you were going to say Chig. I knew you were going to say Chigakonkwo. Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, with Chig, the jury's still out because he's been through kind of such a weird situation in Tennessee. And honestly, if like you're making the Chigakonkwo comp with him, I don't hate that because I still think that Chig has the opportunity to be a really versatile and valuable player in that Tennessee system. And I'm curious as to what the relationship between him and Ward looks like. So I do like the Chigakonkwo call out as well. I think that that's going to be probably another one that's getting stirred around in the pod as Terrence Carter's name gets called up. I know he's not like he's a redshirt junior, so he doesn't have to come up this year. So that'll also be something as he's at Texas Tech, and it'll be interesting to see how his season, you know, progresses towards him either returning or coming out. But I love that call out by you.
Yeah, like I said, I'm excited to get into them, especially because I do like those more movable H-back type players. Especially if that's like they're going to be their committed role, not so much projecting to a tight end, but looking through that lens. So we're going to move on to the big boys now. This is what me and you did for an entire season last year, was interior offensive line, which also included, you know, because last year's class was so weird, a lot of future potential tackle prospects as well, because there was a whole bunch of middling players. But this year, it's a lot more kind of cut and dry. Who's a tackle? Who's a guard? We can kind of group these in together and kind of just do a whole on offensive line one, just toss questions at each other. We even have players that we covered in last year's cycle on those Draft Professor episodes that I still have holdovers from. But for me, I think I'm going to start with, and this will be an offensive tackle question. I am super high on Spencer Fano. And I saw him, he was like tackle 6 for you, I believe, or somewhere around that area.
Oh, let me put some context here because I'm going to get slandered. He's tackle 5 for me. He's my number 21 overall player. So, like, yes, he is tackle 5, but I absolutely love this tackle class. And I have 6 guys. I have 6 guys in my top 25 from this tackle class. So, yes, he is tackle 5. I do like his teammate, Caleb Lomu, a little bit better, as well as, you know, some of the other guys at the top who I know my number 1 guy in Caleb Tiernan, you like a lot as well.
Oh, yeah. And that was one of the ones. So we covered tackles and interior offensive line for those top 5 episodes I was talking about. I keep referencing. And that was a big conversation with Tiernan because he has such a weird build, kind of like who was a player that the Bills, Chase Lund. He was like a 6'7" dude with like sub 34-inch arms who was drafted to the Bills this past year in the 7th round. Whereas Tiernan, I have him as a first-round grade. You have him as tackle 1, 6th overall on your board. What do you think he does to overcome that? Because he definitely plays like a guy who he has a unique play style because of that. Yeah. I just don't think it holds him back nearly as much as like what I saw with Lund, who we did cover towards the end of that draft cycle.
I think the movement skills are just our next level for Caleb Tiernan. He looks like he's already been in a pro style system and has the footwork that you would expect to see. So maybe not like when we're talking about tools and, you know, that overall build where you get into a projection thing. But I think with Tiernan, you know, all those things that you hope you can get to, he's already showing a lot of those things. The biggest deficiency is going to be his arm length, hands down. And people might also point to the 6'7" and say he's going to struggle with leverage. I really didn't see him necessarily struggle with leverage. Hell, I thought he was flexible enough where he was able to get under players and edge rushers and create some leverage of his own. But it's the arm length through and through. But I think that he has become so technically sound in the blocking that he, you know, is able to project on a down by down basis, as well as he's got the athleticism to be able to move at the level that you'd want to see a offensive tackle in the NFL moving at. So I really like him. I think he's, checked all the boxes that he needs to. I'm honestly a little surprised he didn't declare or didn't put his name in last year because he's a redshirt senior this year. And maybe it's just that bit of consistency that the NFL wants to see from him because he had phenomenal grades last year. If you take a look at his PFF scores, the film, like I said, was awesome. I think, there's probably a little bit of feedback to him like, hey, go ahead and just do that again, and we'll feel really comfortable with you because he did that on reps against JTT. Like, if you take a look at the Ohio State game, he handled JTT really well. I think he got beat once, maybe twice. But we're talking about, once again, a top 50 pick in last year's draft that he probably got the better of throughout the entire course of the game.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't know the talking point behind his arm length before watching him, and then I watched him and wrote in my notes, like, I thought he played with great length. And then I learned that he has 32.5-inch arms and a 79-inch wingspan. And I'm like, holy crap, like, that is not normal levels for I was looking at the mock draftable data, and it's like 82-inch wingspan, 34-inch arms, like they mean for offensive tackles that go through the combine. And it's crazy to me that he plays so much more length than he does recorded-wise when it was measured. Yeah. So, and I do think he's a people mover. He can move guys. He has good leverage, even though he has that height. I'm not going to go the whole Jack Nelson route from last year and say he can kick inside the guard at 6'7", but I do think he is a player that he can be a tackle. He's obviously a tackle. I have him there. For me, with Fano, the reason I have him higher than him, he's one of my blue chip players, is that he has that size and people moving ability, but he also has that rare, similar to what you were talking about with Tiernan, rare levels of movement ability. And I think he doesn't have.
Everything is just he's so electric with his feet.
It's so fun. That's some of the most fun offensive tackle film I've ever watched was Spencer Fano at Utah last year. Even in the game, he kind of got schooled by the Southern Utah edge rushers, but killed Colorado's guys who have a couple draftable players. He was just a lockdown for every other game he played outside of that first week one game.
No,
go ahead.
I liked Fano. I think it was kind of funny because I watched Lomu and then I watched Fano back to back. And Lomu I would describe as very smooth and everything kind of looked effortless, but he was able to move out really well. Where Fano, everything was very. Man, what do I have written down? Everything was very quick. It was kind of snappy. And he chops his feet really well. And I think that's why he's such a people mover in the run game because he's not a big guy. Both of them are 300 pounds, if even that. But he's able to just generate so much leverage. And then the quick feet and the strong legs, he's able to just forklift guys off the line and annihilate them from the play.
Yeah. And then, that was really all I wanted to talk about with tackles from me. I think the only thing was I got some eyes on Xavier Chaplin from Virginia Tech from last year. No, I liked the size, and he moves really well for his size. I am a sucker for guys who can move really well, and that's why I even though I'm not the biggest fan of him, Caden Proctor's still a highly graded player for me because he has that size and can move. Similar to the good Evan Neal. Let me say that. The good Evan Neal. A guy who's that size that can have
Does he still exist anymore?
He's on a roster somewhere, I think.
I mean, the good Evan Neal.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. Does the good Evan Neal exist anymore? Yeah. So big guy, obviously. God, what did he come in at? 6'7", 338 pounds. So massive player. And I think so for me, I just need to see him do it at Auburn and continue to get better. He's my projection player. He through and through is my projection player that you need to continue to improve upon. If you have the same film that you had from Virginia Tech, or was it Virginia? I can't remember. Virginia Tech, then I'm probably out on you. But I think if he can continue to grow, that's where I like the potential that he has.
Yeah, and then so the only other thing I would want to touch on with tackle is a player, again, another one you don't have on your list that you need to watch, you're going to love. He may be – no, not this time. He may be a guard. He's 6'4", 6'5", 317. The tackle from SMU, PJ Williams. I don't know. Do you have him as a guard? I didn't check that to double check that, but he is –
No, I don't.
He is awesome. He's super raw. Hand usage is terrible, but he's like this great athlete and just absolutely clears dudes out of the way. Like you love dudes who have these big pancake blocks and just throw dudes around like it's nothing. That's PJ Williams for you at SMU. So if he can clean up some technique stuff, he's a 4-year junior, doesn't have to come out this year, but he's a guy that's like, if you want to talk about fun offensive tackle tape, or you struggle to find watching offensive lineman fun, watch the PJ Williams tape. It's messy in both the best ways and the worst ways.
He's officially on the long list. So I'm my tackle long list. So we'll kind of go forward from there because love kind of getting eyes on those guys as we go through. But to our bread and butter, what did you think about? So for me, we kind of shit on the center class last year, and now I'm like, holy hell, this center class this year is phenomenal. Did you have similar opinion about like that specific subgroup?
Yeah, I didn't hate the center class last year. Like when Slaughter and Logan Jones were still coming out, I liked them for what they were. I just felt like they were more like they needed to go back or they were more scheme specific. I haven't done an updated grade on them again. So we watched them for last year's draft cycle. I'm excited to see what they do this year. I have yet to go. The only like interior player that we covered in our podcast last year that I went back and rewatched or watched some new tape was Armaj Reed Adams, just because we were having our Twitter pissing contest about him, and Sam Teets was in there, and there was a whole argument with that once you posted your top 10 interior offensive line video. But so the other guys like him, between Slaughter, Jones, and then getting off the centers, Emmanuel Pregnon and Jaden Roberts, some of the guys that like I haven't yet gone back and reevaluated my viewing experience for last year's draft class, knowing that they have another year now and more projection-wise. I think the player that's going to stand out the most for me is going to be Slaughter, which, I mean, I've seen first-round mocks for him so far, especially because, he was a super good athlete. I felt like just needed to add a bit more playing strength and then be really developed as technique-wise to compensate for not being the biggest guy in the world. And I do think projecting that forward, I would grade him higher than if it was like, oh, here, evaluate this guy for this year's draft class, which is what we did last year.
Yep. No, I that's literally the two weaknesses I have written down are he does not lack play strength, but his play strength doesn't stand out. He could definitely stand to add some. And he struggles to continuously move his feet throughout blocks, kind of going back to that technique piece when you take a look there. But, as I look at him, and obviously you want to see him continue to grow, I really do like the elements that come from there. And I was shitting all over him last year. And as I kind of break him down now category by category, I'm, more in the camp of like, this guy actually does a lot of things really well that I think were, maybe more ignored by me. But now that I'm like kind of categorizing things and giving him credit in all of these individual areas, I did like him. So he actually came out as interior offensive lineman 1 for me. I got a second round grade on him. I don't have any first round grades on interior offensive lineman, but I think that like when you take a look at him, Connor Liu as well, I like a lot. And then obviously like Logan Jones and Parker Brailsford, guys that we talked about a little bit last year that we're now able to kind of continue that conversation here. I think this is a really fun center class.
Yeah, especially with some of the names, like because I didn't get to all the names last year when it came to like top end centers. We covered, like I said, Logan Jones and Jake Slaughter, but Parker Brailsford, Hinsman from Ohio State. He's kind of on the lesser end because he wasn't really a starter for Ohio State until this year, or he would just transfer there for this to be started this year. So I do think he's a guy that can grow more. I do think the center class is definitely – there's no way it's not better than last year's class, mostly because the guys we're talking about in this year's class left last year's class, making last year's class even worse. So I fail to see how this year's class can't be any worse than last year's, especially when your center 1 goes undrafted to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, this is very true. He was not undrafted. Oh, he was in my – wait, my center 1?
No, my center 1.
Oh, you had McLaughlin as center 1, really?
I had McLaughlin as center 1.
Oh my gosh! Wow, I didn't know that. I'm sorry for your loss.
It's okay, I mean, and he just got cut by the Bengals too. Great.
My center 2 went undrafted to Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Jake Majors. So there's that for you. Yeah,
the real great center class last year.
And I believe Jared Wilson is playing guard for New England. So I don't know if there's a center that came out of last year's class that is going to be playing center on an NFL roster in any capacity.
That's hilarious. The only other name, so we've had our talks with our Mars Reed Adams, and I don't put nearly as much punishment on his penalties as you do. I think that's going to be something he can clean up. And
if he cleans it up, I will obviously respect his game a little bit more. But I have to see him clean it up because I think he's a good enough player. I truly think he is just a little lazy, and that's why he's got those penalties. But I digress.
Yeah, well, so I was going to say after we had our conversation about it, I went through and watched all the recorded penalties PFF has on him, which I think there's I don't know why I'm going to guess this. I can just double check it.
I'll tell you right now, there's 11 penalties last year.
Right. Okay. So, and I think because I remember seeing that, and I was trying to account for which ones were like holding penalties or kind of like those penalties you want to see. I need to get cleaned up from the technique perspective. And I think most of them. No, there were some. Obviously, there was a face mask or a couple holds. I would probably like half of them were ones that you want to see cleaned up, but the other half were him doing either extracurriculars or just bad calls by the ref. Like he had a trap where one or two of them were traps where he just grabs a guy and throws him down, and it's a totally legitimate offensive line play, and they get called for a hold in there. Or there was extracurriculars where a guy hits somebody late, he comes in and lays down a hit, and that's a flag. So like those were all accounted for in that. So I do definitely think it's a problem that he needs to get over with, especially with the holding aspect when he's out in space. But I love the frame with the size, with the speed. Yeah. He's not a tackle. He tried it at Kansas and a little bit of Texas A&M. He's not a tackle. But as a guard player, like on the Miami Dolphins, if there is still the Mike McDaniel Miami Dolphins, where they're looking for guys who have size but can also move and do that wide zone stuff, he'd be perfect. Like I love him for that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And like right now, and obviously, I'm going to continue to get more guys on my board. Guys are going to move up and down. Like he's 109 for me right now on my like extended board. I usually don't publish past 50 early on, but he's a guy that he's got that fringe day 2, day 3 grade where he's kind of like just sitting there teetering a little bit. I'm genuinely, and I'm glad he came back. I hope it wasn't just for, the injury he suffered late in the season. I hope it was because he recognized that he's got to continue to grow as a player. But I think like you said, 6'5", 338 with those movement skills and almost 34-inch arms, like he's built really, really well for the guard position. If he can continue to clean that up, I think he's going to be a really exciting prospect.
And just to stick with our tradition we've been doing as we close out these positions and the videos as a whole, I will give you a name that you don't have on your list as a long watch that I definitely think you need to add on, and it's going to be so our Raj Reed Adams right now, of the limited sample size I have, he's my interior offensive lineman number 1 with a 3rd-round grade. The only other one I have with a day 2 grade as a true interior offensive lineman is Josh Thompson, who's now on LSU. LSU. And he was previously of Northwestern, played with Caleb Tiernan. He was a right tackle and a right guard. And he was just super technically sound, won't blow you away with power or nasty or anything like that. But he was surviving in the Big Ten and was like trading blows with the Michigan guys, and Ohio State guys, and looked comfortable there. Now he's transferred to LSU. Apparently he's not up. Like there was maybe some character concerns. I heard that from an LSU source I have. But overall, like being at Northwestern, you have to have a certain level of grades and academic prowess that like you have to be able to be on the football team in general. Like they're one of the highest standard schools out there. So he's definitely more of a high intelligent guy. I think, I don't know to the extent the character problems were perhaps at LSU, but for me, the tape, he's good, 3rd-round tape, and going from Northwestern to LSU, I think he has the opportunity to really make a name for himself if he can stay clean this upcoming season.
He's on my list. I'll definitely be sure to get eyes on him.
And with that, we got through in 90 minutes our entire offensive big boards, and we definitely, I don't think we've never agreed more. I think because we had our quarterback list kind of similar.
Yeah,
wide receivers were pretty similar. I think the biggest contention we had was like running backs, tight ends, maybe
running backs, and probably interior offensive lineman was a fair amount different, but the wide receivers was freakily freakily similar. I don't like it.
Yeah, I need to start disagreeing with you more on everything.
I'm just gonna start hating one of my guys just to argue with you.
I got to stop also taking your guys. You were a Denzel Boston guy, and then I'm like, yeah, he's my wide receiver one. And then you were a Jonah Coleman guy, and I was like, all right, yeah, he's my running back too. So I'm just like stole your guys from you. I'm gonna come in.
To be fair, I messaged you knowing full well that you're a Washington fan, being like, I got this guy right here. But no, absolutely, this was fun. Breaking these guys down. Looking forward to hit the defensive side next.
Yeah, knowing to give a sneak peek to that whenever we record that, it would probably be sometime next week when we get some more eyes on some of these defensive guys and really polish it up before we hop into our podcast. But knowing how that trend goes, you're going to steal one of my guys, and you're going to be the TJ guy fan on this podcast as opposed to me. So we'll see how that goes.
We'll see. I'm excited.
If you're interested in this, and I'll probably chop this up as much as I can to get some smaller content out to really push us towards more viewers on this podcast. But if you enjoyed this longer form stuff or just hearing us talk about our summer scouting boards, go ahead and hit a subscribe and follow along with the Weekly Huddle podcast, or go over with Zero Tech Draft and see all of Newt's articles, videos he has posted over there, as well as the amazing merch store, which I cannot praise enough with this sweatshirt on. But with all that being said, I'm Owen from the Weekly Huddle. This is Newt Weston, also kind of from the Weekly Huddle, but also from Zero Tech Draft was it NFL _draft Weston, something like that?
NFL draft _Weston.
I moved the underscore. I should know this.
Other than that.
But for us both here, we enjoyed this, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. And we'll see you guys in the next podcast.